right. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We say shalom, shalom. Welcome to everyone who is in the house on tonight and those who are joining us online in the different platforms that we have out there. We welcome each and every one of you. We say shalom unto you. Come on in to Yah's house. It's going to be all right. It's going to be all right on this Torah teaching on today. And our prayers are going up. We're constantly praying for our brothers and sisters, our Akis and Akotis, the sons and daughters of the Most High, all of His children, near and far. Those who are sick and afflicted in their bodies, we certainly have prayers going up for you. It's good to see my brother here on today. Hallelujah, and certainly been praying for him and just get the strength in the body. Let's keep Mother Carruthers up in prayer. I believe she's recovering. She had a fall, and she was in the hospital. Talked to Vanessa, but let's keep her up in prayer. Mother Smith as well, along with our other brothers and sisters. We certainly want to let them know that they're in our prayers. And if there's something that we can do for them, we certainly will. We're in a day and an hour. We're moving up to the end of the year. This is the last. You look at the moon outside, and you see how it's getting to be a full moon, and then it's going to go down. Once we have a full moon, this is the last full moon on the year of the Hebrew calendar. And so the next new moon that you see, which should be around March 22nd, March 23rd, somewhere around there, probably March 22nd that night when we see the new moon, that's a new year for us. That's a new year. So we'll say Happy New Year. We're coming up on that time, So it is a special time for Israel. It is a special time for Yasharal. It's a time that is never to be forgotten, and for His people never to forget. Now, we haven't followed it because we haven't been taught to follow it. But in Exodus chapter 12, we'll start there, Exodus chapter 12. And I want to start with, there's several verses there that we can pull out, but I want to start with verse number 14. Exodus 12 and verse number 14. And this is why it's so important to Yasharal. He gave this to Yasharal. And he tells you, and if some man tells you that it doesn't have to be kept, you don't have to recognize, and everything, then what they're doing is they're speaking above the Most High. If you believe a man or a woman that tells you that that's not important, you don't have to keep it, then you've got somebody, you're listening to somebody that is putting themselves above the Most High Yah. And if you follow that and you're obedient unto that, then you're obedient unto. Before we go here, we're going to come back here, but Romans 6:16. I just want to put this. I just kind of want to drop this nugget, Romans 6:16, because you have a lot of people that says we don't have to do it. That you don't have to follow that. That's not important. And so he says here in Romans 6:16, he says, "Know ye not that to whom ye yield your members, servants to what? Obey." If you yield your members to servants to obey, His servants ye are to whom ye obey. So if somebody is telling you that it's not important, you don't have to do it, we don't recognize the Hebrew calendar, all of that is done away with and everything. If you obey that, then you become their servant. Whoever you yield yourselves to, His servants, whatever you obey, you're His servants. And it says here, His servants ye are to whom ye obey. He says, whether of sin unto death or what? Your obedience brings out righteousness. Your obedience brings out righteousness. So by me obeying the scriptures and obeying Torah, it's through my obedience that I produce righteousness. And he even tells you, we don't have to go there, but in the 12th chapter of Matthew, he tells us that make the tree good or make it evil. Because a tree is known by what? The fruit it bears. So either I'm going to be good and be obedient, obedience unto righteousness, or I'm not going to be obedient. But whoever I listen to and whoever I obey, I'm a servant to whomever I obey. So if I obey Torah and obey the teachings of the book and I keep those commandments, then that's my righteousness. He says here, obedience unto righteousness. He even told us in, we don't have to go there, but Matthew 5 and 20, he says, except your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you're not going to get in. That's what Yahusha said. So what if a preacher tells you, well, you don't have to do it? What if somebody comes along and says, I don't know why, man, y'all, what y'all doing? We ain't never kept that. What's up with y'all? New Year, we had our New Year already. Pope Gregory's calendar had its New Year. He told us, now let's go back to Exodus 12:14. He told us, this is coming from the Most High Yah. It's an oracle that comes from the Most High Yah. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial. A memorial is something that you're never supposed to forget. Remind me of this every year. Every year that comes by, let me know when the first month is. Let me know when that new year begins, because soon as that new year begins, what do? We start counting the days. We start making preparation because we know in 14, once that new year starts, that new moon, our next new moon, we count 14 days, and that's a day we're never to forget. He says, for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to Yahuwah throughout your what? Generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Forever. So forever means throughout the kingly reign, throughout the captivity, because even in the time of their captivity, it was still supposed to be memorialized. When the Hebrews went into the Babylonian captivity, you had some, for example, Daniel, you had the three Hebrew boys. It didn't matter where they were in their captivity. They were not going to bow to paganism. I just ain't going to do it. I don't care. Well, we're going to kill you. Well, then you can kill me, because I'm not bowing to no paganism. I'm just not going to do it. But what did the Hebrew boys say? If he doesn't, we know he can't. But if he doesn't, we want the king to know we ain't bound to you. So, I mean, it's like they poked him in the eye. They were not afraid. Most of us, we're afraid. Most of us, we're afraid. We're afraid of our families. Well, what's my family going to say? What's your family going to say? You should be worried about what the Most High Yah is going to say. I don't know if mama going to like it. Mama? Well, I don't know if my spouse might not like it. They were so convinced that it didn't matter if they had to die, they were going to die believing in what they were going to believe. I'd rather die than switch. I think that was a slogan somewhere. I'd rather die than switch. It says here, for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to Yahuwah throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Because some people say, well, when Christ came, when the Mashiach came, then we don't have to keep that anymore. Well, let's go to Acts chapter 12. Acts chapter 12 and verse number 4. Acts 12 and 4. And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after, this is Pesach, to bring them forth to the people. Go up to verse number 3. Go up to verse number 3. And because he saw it pleased the Yahudim, he proceeded further to take Kepha also. Then were the days of unleavened bread. So they kept it in the book of Acts. They kept it Acts 18, and let's see, verse 41. Acts 18:41. Acts 18, verse 41. Is there not 41 verses in Acts 18? Huh? Okay. 18 and let's go down to like 23 or 24. Let's look at that. It's towards the end of Acts. Okay, let's go down. Where's that? It's in Acts 18, where he says he's going to go to the feast. And I apologize. I should have had that. I should know that. It's in the 18th chapter of Acts, because he was going to keep the feast. 21. I said 41. It's 21. Okay. But bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you if Elohim will. And he set sail from Ephesus. So even though Paul was way out in Ephesus, after the resurrection, after the pouring out of the Ruach HaKodesh, he still was going to keep the feast in Jerusalem. Even on his missionary journeys. Time out. What's the time out for? I got to get back to Jerusalem to keep the feast. Why did he have to do that? Because let's go back to Exodus 12 and 14. Let's go back to Exodus 12 and 14. Because a lot of people think that it ended. At the resurrection, it ended. It did not end. It did not end. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to Yahuwah throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. So it's something that's going to be continual. Throughout this chapter here, and also in other chapters, he gives a command that they were supposed to keep it. So for us, and well, how come it's never been such a demand before? How come it's never been something that we were supposed to? Because we weren't taught. We weren't taught to keep it. And there's a lot of people who don't keep it now. They don't keep it now. You know what they keep? They keep Good Friday and Easter Sunday. That's what they keep. Good Friday and Easter Sunday. Matthew 12 and let's start about, verse 40? Yeah, let's go up to 38. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from thee. So a lot of people want to see signs. Show me a sign. Even when we come up, we always want to see a sign. Give me a sign of what is going on. But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation does what? Seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. There's no way you're going to get 3 days or 3 nights from Good Friday to Easter Sunday. You don't get 3 days, 3 nights from that. So what they're giving you is a total lie. It's a lie. And then they have a bunny. Why are you talking about that? Because we need to prepare ourselves because we're getting ready to go into a very important time. This is something that we were never supposed to forget. He didn't say, remember my birth, but he did say, remember my death. And so all of the what we're learning leading up to this is the type of preparations that we're going to have to do. This is a special time because our preparations, not only is it within our hearts and our spirits and our minds and our bodies, you have the physical and the spiritual preparation that we should be doing. This is very unique and very interesting time for me that I feel in my Ruach, because I've said, a couple years ago, I think in 2021, I said Pesach 2023. After Pesach 2023, everything's going to go off the rails. And that was before the war in Ukraine. That was before all of this other stuff that is going on. I just felt that actually, if you look at, because some people might say, well, what are you basing that on? What do you base that on? Well, from the time of what they call 1619 to 2019, the 400 years, from the time of that 400 years, this Pesach is 3.5 years since September of 2019. 3.5 years you have Pesach. His feast days tells a story. It tells us when John the Baptist was born. 6 months later, Yahuchanan was born at the time of Passover. Yahusha was born 6 months later. So if you go from Passover 6 months later, you have the Feast of what? Tabernacles or Sukkot. So you have the Feast of Pesach. 6 months later, you have the Feast of Sukkot. Sukkot means he's going to come and tabernacle with us, and that's what he did. He actually tabernacled with us. He came, the Word was made flesh, and it dwelt among us. That's the time of tabernacle. So this Pesach is 3.5 years, and if we start to see things just really get worse, and I just believe that they will, we definitely got to prepare ourselves for the inevitable. We have to not only be prepared mentally and spiritually in our hearts and our spirits, but we also have to be prepared physically. And there's some preparations that we have to do. We're entering into that time of preparation. As soon as you see the new moon, that's the days of preparation, because what they had to do when they went through the days of preparation, what were they doing? They were cleaning their house. They were going through the house, and I like to look at Galatians, the 5th chapter, and call that house cleaning. Because if you look at Galatians, the 5th chapter, verse, I think it's 17, 18, and 19, or 19, somewhere around, it talks about the works of the flesh. So you got a lot of house cleaning that you have to do in your preparation. So when that new moon hits, that's the day of preparation. They had to go through their entire house and make sure there was no leaven in the house. They had to get rid of all the leaven. And then on the 10th day of for some people, it would take a long time. They might even think, man, I don't know if 14 days is enough time. But they would have to have all of it out, because at the time of Passover, Pesach, at that 14th day, they were not supposed to have any leaven in their house. So what happened on the 10th day? What did they do on the 10th day? Well, the 10th day is when they actually selected the lamb. They had to go out and look at the lamb and make sure they selected the lamb, and the lamb had to be kosher. They had to inspect the lamb, and it was a type of preparation when they prepared the lamb, and it wasn't supposed to be sieved in its mother's milk, and it was just preparation that they had to do, and we're gonna have to prepare. So we're gonna have to prepare, and I'm not a prophet. I hate to kind of say, because sometimes I think, man, this is what I'm feeling, but I'm not a prophet. I'm not a prophet. But because, after Pesach 2023, What if things don't fall off the rails? Like I said, Hazlitt said this, Hazlitt said that. See there, he's a false prophet. No, I'm not saying I'm prophesying, but the reason why I said Pesach 2023 is because that's 3.5 years after the 2019. 3.5 years is this Pesach. And then the Bible does speak about the last 42 months. A time, times, and a half a time. A time would be a year. Times is 2 years, so that's 3. And then half a time would be half a year. 3.5 years, it also comes up to that 42-month period to where he says, if I don't shorten them days, there's not going to be any flesh going to make it. I have to shorten those days for my very elect's sake. So I'm going to have to gather my elect. It says that, and we've been covering some of this. We've been covering some of this, and even the fact of the first resurrection, because when is the first resurrection going to be? According to the book of Revelations. I'm not talking about somebody's philosophy. I'm talking about the book of I'm talking about going to the scriptures and pulling out scriptures, because it says in 1 Corinthians that we have to prove all things. Or I'm sorry, not Corinthians, 1 Thessalonians 5:22, I think it is. It says we have to prove all things. So we have to prove everything by scripture. So the first resurrection, according to scripture, according to the Bible, is that when is the first resurrection? Revelations chapter 20. Revelations chapter 20 and verse number 4. Let's start there. Revelations 20 and 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and the judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahusha, and for the word of Elohim, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Mashiach 1,000 years. Who lived and reigned with them for 1,000 years? Those who were beheaded during the tribulation. Notice now, those who were beheaded, and I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahusha and for the word of Elohim, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark. These were the ones that during that tribulation period, they gave up their head. It's not just notice now, this is a different people now. It's not the same people because you have some that's going to survive. You got some that is going to survive, and so we have to show you the ones that are survived. But those who, what we call, those that we would call, and I can define it like this, left behind. Those who were left behind from his, after he gathered his people, those who were left behind, the ones who did not worship the beast, his image, nor received his mark, and they were beheaded because of that, they were going to reign with him 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. The first resurrection are those who went through the period and was beheaded. And then you have the first resurrection to where they're going to reign with him 1,000 years. So that first resurrection has to coincide with everything else in the scripture, because how many first resurrections is there? Well, there only could be one first resurrection. There can only be one first resurrection. And so the first resurrection doesn't happen until after the tribulation period. That's when you have the first resurrection. And he says, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death has no power. But they shall be priests of Elohim and Mashiach, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. This is different from the other, his bride, that's going to reign with him how long? Forever. So you look at Revelations 5. Look at Revelations 5 and verse number 9. And they sang a new song, saying, thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to Elohim by thy blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation, and hast made us unto Elohim. What? What were the other people? They were beheaded, but what were they? We just read it. They were, but what were they? Okay, let's go back. Remember this, we're going to come back here. Let's go back to Revelations 20, verse number 4, 5, and 6. Verse number 4, 5, and 6. Verse number 6, blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death have no power, but they shall be, what? Of Elohim and Mashiach, and shall reign with him for 1,000 years. Revelations 5 and 9. Let's go back. Revelations 5 and 9. They sang a new song, thou art worthy. Notice what it says here. And has made us unto Elohim what? What were the other people? They were priests. They were not the kingly. They were not in the order of Melchizedek. They're not in the order of Melchizedek. That's why they're reigning as priests, but it's only for 1,000 years. But those who are purchased by his blood or redeemed by his blood, we are in the order of Melchizedek because we become his bride. We become his bride. And everybody's not his bride. Only those that have been redeemed by his blood, they're his bride, and then they get to reign with him as kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth. This is the order of Melchizedek, because Yahusha has come in the order of Melchizedek, and Yahusha is going to have a bride. He's going to have his bride, and these are his bride, and they get to reign with him on earth. As long as there is an earth, they're going to be reigning with him. Let's go to Yahuchanan 11 and 49. We've been building on this. Yahuchanan 11 and 49. Yahuchanan 11, 49. It's really important for us to know how the Bible's written. You have to know how the Bible's written. If you don't understand how it's written, then you'll easily be moved or believe something else. If you don't know how it's written, you're going to easily believe something else. Most people will tell you the Bible's written to the whole world. It's not. The Bible is not written to the whole world. Most people will say he's the Elohim of everybody. He's the God of everybody. And that's not what he said. He specifically says he's the Elohim or the God of the Hebrews. We can go to scriptures. If I have to prove it, we can go to scriptures, but that's what he said. He is the Elohim of the Hebrews. And so he spoke specifically to the Hebrews and gave them the oracles. Now, whether people want to accept it or not, that is the truth. And some people can't handle that. They don't like that because for so long they have believed something contrary to that. So when you come out with this, ye know nothing at all. When you come out with this, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die. And who is this one man dying for? For the people, and who? And that the whole nation perish not. The one that he died for was this nation, so that nation doesn't perish. When he returns, he's returning after this nation. So if you're not in that nation, you're not going to be gathered unto him. You have to be in that nation. And we're going to see that. Because unless you're in that nation is like the ark. How many arks were there back in Noah's day? Only one ark. So if you wanted to be saved from the flood, could you just pick I don't like the way Noah built his. I think I'm going to build my own. I don't like the way, in fact, I don't want to be cooped up with some animals. So I'm going to build my own ark, and I'm only going to put on it the things that I want to eat. I'm only going to make it so big for me and my family, or me and my people. I'm not making it for, so when you leave it in the hands of man, he is going to customize it according to himself and according to his own likes, his own judgment, his own jurisprudence, who can get on there and everything. That's not what the Most High did. He made one ark, and the only ones that was saved were those who were in the ark. And that's it. So if you want to be redeemed by the blood, like we read before, you have to know whose blood. He shed his blood, he gave his life for that whole nation. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahusha should die for who? For that nation. The reason why he had to die for that nation is because it was prophesied. It was prophesied. So because this is what we tend to do, and we get this, it's you got Romanitis. I'm gonna make up a word. You got Romanitis because we want to believe what they've told us and not believe the book. Not believe the book. And even some commentators will tell you, well, yeah, he had to die for Israel because that's what was prophesied, but we know that he also died for the whole world. And that's kind of how they'll do it. Another thing that they do is, yeah, he died for that nation, but that nation is the church. And so they try to say everything that was prophesied in the Torah was talking about the church. And who do you think is over the church? Well, I know Yahusha is, but in the world, who do you think is over the church? Rome. Rome is over it. That's what Catholicism is. That's what Catholic. Catholic means universal. We're over the whole universe. They even make the claim that Peter was the first pope, and it's a lie. It's a lie. When they make that claim, Peter's the first pope, that's a lie. But they come out with their own commentary on this book, and if you're not careful, you'll be caught up in that and not in the truth of this word. In the truth of this word. Even when he says, because when you understand this, it makes it a little clearer when you read John 3, 14, 15, and 16. When you read that, then you know what he's talking about is that nation. And he goes on to say, and not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of Elohim that were scattered abroad. So when I understand this, then it gives me a little clearer understanding of Yahuchanan 3:16. Gives me a clearer understanding of Yahuchanan 3:16. Because if I listen to Rome and I catch Romanitis, then I'm going to think it's, everybody else. Well, where did you get that from? That's what Rome said. That's what Rome said. The book don't say that. So we have to stay within the book. We have to stay within the scriptures if we want to get in the ark and be able to make it out of here. You are going to have some who are left behind, and those who are left behind, they're going to have to be beheaded, and they're going to have to, once they give up their head, that's their life. But they can't take the mark. They can't take the mark of the beast, can't take his name, his image. What else did it say? It says you can't, they didn't take the mark or the image or his name. It said 3 different things, right? The number, yeah. So they didn't take that, and they, in order, because what the world is going to say in that last world ruler before Yahusha returns to rule on the earth, sets up his kingdom. If you don't, and if you don't take his mark, then you're going to have to give up your life. But for those of us that he's going to gather, like he says here, gather together, those of us who he's going to gather together, if you're gathered with him, then you're not going to have to worry about getting your head cut off. You won't have to worry about that. If you make this gathering, you're not going to have to worry about it. If you don't make that gathering, they're going to force the mark on you. And if you take the mark, that's it. That's it. Now, if you don't take the mark, then you'll be beheaded, but you're going to be a part of that first resurrection. You'll be in that first resurrection to where you'll be able to reign with him 1,000 years. So in Ephesians, I want to go to Ephesians chapter 1 and verse number 3, 4. 3, let's get 3. 3. Blessed be Elohim and Abba. Notice, listen how Shaul words this. Blessed be Elohim and Abba of our Adonai, Yahushua Mashiach, who hath blessed us with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places in Mashiach. Verse number 4, according as he hath, what's this? Chosen us in him before the foundation of the world. So we're going to look at this verse here, and as he hath chosen us. In order for us to understand this, because see, a lot of people will tell you, and the Roman religion would tell you, he chose the church from the foundation of the world. But you can't prove that in Scripture. You cannot prove that ideology in Scripture. We're going to come back here, but in Isaiah 41, verse number 8, Isaiah 41 and 8, but thou, Yasharah, art my servant, Jacob, whom I have, what? The seed of Abraham, my friend. Jacob was chosen, the seed of Abraham, his friend. Listen, verse 9. Thou whom I have taken from where? The ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, thou art my, I have what? Chosen thee and not cast thee away. Is this the only place he says it? No. There's a number of places that he says that Jacob is his chosen seed. But we're going to look at some things here. Let's go to Isaiah 43 and verse number 10. Ye are my witness, saith Yahuwah, and my servant whom I have what? That ye may know and believe me and understand that I am he. Before me there was no Elohim formed, neither shall there be after me. This is the ones that he chosen was supposed to be his witness. Those are my witnesses. So let's go down, and there's another, let's go down, verse number, there's 13, slow down. Further down here, let's see this one. Okay, this here is, we'll look at this later because we have to deal with blotting out thy transgressions and will not remember thy sins. We're gonna look at that. Look at that later. Let's go through to the next chapter, verse 1, Isaiah 44 and verse 1. Yet now hear, O Yaakov, my servant, and Yasharal, whom I have what? Whom I have chosen. Thus saith Yahuwah that made thee and formed thee from the womb, which will help thee. Fear not, O Yaakov, my servant, and thou Yasharan, whom I have chosen. There's over and over you can pull up scriptures after scripture after scripture for witnesses to verify the fact that the ones he had chosen was Yasharal. Now, a lot of people, I've read this, and a lot of people say, well, Yasharal was his servant. They weren't his sons. Yasharal was his servant. It wasn't his son. But we got to look at that too. So in Hosea 11 and 1, Hosea 11 and 1, because we got to get rid of people's Romanitis. You got to get rid of that, and you got to believe the book. And if it's written in the book, it must be true. I'd rather read the book and understand the book than to read somebody's commentary, because I do have commentaries. But I'd rather read the book and get an understanding of the book than read somebody's commentary. Because just because they have a commentary over it, Rome has already told you that they have taken the place of Yasharal. So everywhere in the Old Testament where it talks about Israel and Yasharal, it's referring to Rome. But what does our commandment say? What's a commandment that'll just break all of that up? Notice what they said. When he chose Israel, that's talking about the church. He chose Israel from the foundation of the world, that's talking about the church. We are the church, so he chose us. Not Israel, he chose us. What commandment would we throw on them that would break all of that up? There's 10 commandments, so thou shalt not have no other gods before me. Yep, you can't have that. But what can we throw on them that would just blow that right out of the water? Because what have they done? What have they done? They lied, and what else did they do? They bore false witness. They did a lie. They did lie. What'd you say? They took his name in vain. Covet, thou shalt not covet. They don't honor the Sabbath. Thou shalt not steal. They stole the identity. That was number 8, right? Thou shalt not steal. So as soon as they say, oh, everywhere where they're talking about Israel and the promises and the covenants of Israel, they're talking about the church. They're talking about us. They're talking about the church. I mean, they broke a lot of them. Thou shalt not lie. That's one of them. You're not supposed to lie. You're not supposed to covet anything, but you stole their identity. Huh? They did steal it because they changed it. So everything about them that the whole Roman construct of Christianity is wrong. Just the whole construct of it is wrong. And they made the construct of it. They even made it. And it's fashioned after Constantine's creed. So, I mean, we can't follow that. Remember now, to whom you yield your members to obey, ye are his servants to whom you obey, right? So if Constantine says we're doing away with all the feasts, we ain't going to recognize none of them. We don't want none of your holy days. Did he say that? I don't want none of your holy days. We ain't going to remember none of them. So if I follow that, then I become his servant. Whoever you obey, you become that person's servant. And that's what we had come. We became their servant. Didn't we read that? Romans 6:16. And he says, you're the servant to whom you obey. Now, if I obey Yahusha, and I'm his servant and I obey him, what is that counted to me as? Righteousness. Righteousness. So for me to come up on Pesach, it's righteousness to keep the Pesach. It's righteousness to keep unleavened bread. It's righteousness to keep the feast. That's what he's looking for. If he wants you to obey him, obey me. I set this up. This is a memorial forever. Your righteousness is on display if you obey me. And Yahusha says, except your righteousness exceed that of the scribes and Pharisees, you ain't getting in. You ain't getting in. So by me being obedient shows my, and he says, oh man, I don't have time. But Hebrews 5 and 9, we don't have to go there, but who knows what Hebrews 5 and 9 says? I'll start it off. And being made perfect, he became the author of what? Eternal salvation unto who? All those who obey. So your eternal righteous or your eternal salvation is dependent on your obedience. It's dependent on your obedience. And your obedience shows your righteousness. If I obey him, I'm showing, every time I keep the Shabbat, I'm showing my righteousness. Not of my own self, but because I'm being obedient unto him. It's just my obedience. Don't y'all know Constantine knew what he was doing? He knew what he was doing. He knew he was over the whole kingdom. He was over all of Rome and all their provinces. He was a world leader. Constantine was a world leader that said, we ain't doing nothing what them Yahudim doing. He didn't even like them. I ain't keeping no feast days. In fact, I worship the sun, so y'all gonna worship the sun. Yes. Shaul's teaching was converting them. Yeah. Yeah. Shaul's teaching started to convert them because his teaching went throughout Rome and he had to squash it. I got to squash this. And he did. The tragedy for us today, there's a couple of tragedies, but the tragedy for us today is we have men and women who are our teachers who will not take the time to study that, to see that they're following Constantine's creed. They won't take the time. If they do take the time and study Constantine's creed, there's no repentance in them. And they'll tell you, can't change. We're too far down the road now. Hey, I make my bag on Sunday. We can't change. Yeah. But they think they can get away because they're Gentiles. Well, I'm a Gentile, I don't have to keep it. But that is the very admission that Yahshua is supposed to keep it. Just by saying that. Well, I'm a Gentile, I don't have to keep that. Oh, Yahshua has to keep it, right? Yeah, that's Yahshua. They have to keep it. I don't have to keep it, I'm a Gentile. Well, don't you know you have to get into Yahshua if you want to be saved? They haven't got. It says it right there, doesn't it? In Yahuchanan 4:22, he says it right there. Yahuchanan 4:22, he says, "You worship, you know not what. We know what we worship. We know what we worship. For salvation is of the Yahudim." That's that ark. That's that ark. If you want to get in, if you want to make it in, you better get in this ark. You better get in. Salvation is of the Yahudim. I wonder why the Roman religion and all those who have Romanitis, I wonder why they don't believe that. I mean, he said it, right? I mean, you know, they say Jesus is God. Well, why don't you believe his words? It's right there. He says it. Salvation is of the Yahudim. If you want to be saved, you better get in the Yahudim. That's where you're going to go. And he goes on, he even tells them in the chapter before that, he says, if you want to, or you must be born again if you want to see it. And then you have to be born of water and spirit to do what? To get in. To get in here, to get in this ark, to get in here, you better be born of water and spirit. That's how you get in. Now, one thing that they want to say is that Israel was a servant, and so now he's given birth to sons. Okay? So we're gonna look at that too. Let's go back to Ephesians before I run out of time. Ephesians, the first chapter. We were on verse what, 4? Is that where we were? According he has chosen us in him before the foundation of the world. Okay, the chosen here and foundation of the world. Foundation of the world. So in the first foundation of the world, when we go back to Adam, who did he choose? Anybody know? Before Seth. No, from Adam and Eve, then he chose Abel. He chose Abel. You have to know that after Abel and Cain was born, they still had children. While Abel was still alive, they had children. But the chosen seed was who? Abel. Abel was a chosen seed, even though they was having children. It says they had sons and daughters. We don't even know the daughters' names. We don't know the daughter, but he had daughters. It was plural. And if you're living 900 years and they was having babies even at 100 and so, I mean, they had a lot of kids. They just had a lot of kids. And so he had sons and daughters. The point that I'm trying to make is from the time that he chose Abel and that seed through Abel, he still had sons and daughters. But what happened to Abel? He was killed. So then what had to happen after that? He had another seed. And who was that seed? Seth. Why didn't he choose some of the ones that are already living? He already had them. But he chose Seth because he has a chosen seed. He didn't choose every... Oh, you guys can't see it. Can't see it. Y'all can't see it. He could have chosen, he didn't. He says, I have a chosen seed. I got Abel. It's coming through Abel. So Cain said, the devil says, well, I'm going to kill that one. You have to remember, when he fell from heaven, he was after the firstborn. He came to deceive the whole world. He chased a woman. He said, I'm going to get that child. Cain rose up and killed Abel. He had Seth. I'm going to have Seth now. So you trace Seth's seed down, the foundation of the world after Adam and Eve. When was the next reset or foundation of the world? Yeah, at Noah's time. So we have, even at the time of Noah, now we're dealing with another foundation because he got rid of everybody else except 8 people. And those 8 people came, the seed came through Seth all the way through. Enoch was a 7th generation. Then you had Methuselah, who was the grandfather of Noah, I believe it was, all the way through that. Noah was perfect in his generation. Noah had 3 sons. So the seed was still there, but he had a reset. I'm cleaning off the whole earth. And the only one that found grace in his eyes was Noah. He found grace. And so he preserved and kept Noah. That was another foundation. Okay. Chosen us in him before the foundation of the world that we should be holy, Kodesh, which means what? Set apart. That we should be holy and set apart. Before we get there, the foundation of the world, Deuteronomy 32 and verse number 8. Deuteronomy 32 and 8. When the Most High divided the nations, now here we got a reset here. We got a reset. We're going back to the foundation. Okay. We had they're downstairs, they're breaking up our foundation because we're doing some waterproofing, right? So once they're done laying the tile and everything like that, we're going to get cement poured back on it, right? We got to reset. We're redoing the foundation again. So when he did this with the 8 people, this is the foundation now. We're going back to the time of Noah. He says here, when the Most High divided the nations, their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Yasharal. Now, this is King James. I'd rather we got different not translations, but different versions. Is that right? Got different versions. So let's come up here and compare. And I want to look at first Brenton. Brenton is the Septuagint translated into English. So from the Septuagint translated into English, it says, when Most High divided the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the nations according to the number of the angels of Elohim. That sounds a little different than King James, doesn't it? Because the Septuagint predates the King James. King James was translated from the Latin Vulgate. And that was in 1611. The Septuagint, anybody know when the Septuagint was written? Septuagint was written when they were in captivity. They were in the Greek captivity. It was because you had the 4 beasts. Remember, Daniel had the 4 beasts. You had the first head of the beast was Babylon, and then after that was the Mede Persians. Then you had the Greeks. At the time of the Greeks' captivity, the Greeks took the 72 brightest men, I think it was 6 out of each tribe, and had them take those Hebrew scriptures and translate them into Greek. And it was called the Greek Septuagint. Septuagint means 70. The Greek Septuagint, or the Septuagint, predates our Messiah by about 300 years. So at the time that our Messiah was walking the earth, the Septuagint was there. And so they had the sacred Hebrew scriptures, but they also had the Septuagint. You know, those Greeks, they coveted that book. How many read Psalms or Proverbs 1 today? This is the first day of the month, Proverbs 1. What does it say in Proverbs 1 about the Most High and everything? It calls, did we see that? They coveted this book because there's a lot of dark sayings. That's what it says in the first chapter, a lot of dark sayings. I mean, because and it's not dark like evil, it's dark like mysterious. Like they don't know. And usually if you don't know something, you're usually afraid of it. I'm afraid of the unknown. I don't know. But them Hebrews, man, they got a lot of stuff in that book. We want to know what you know. Because it says, and we're going to get there, it says, because he talks about they have to be holy or set apart. Because when you go back to Deuteronomy chapter 4, which we will, if we got time, Deuteronomy chapter 4, what did he say other nations are going to look at you and what? You guys are a wise and a special people. I mean, you guys are understanding people. I mean, at one time, the nation of Yasharal was the most desired nation in the whole world. He said, I made you beautiful. I did all of this for you. But then they trusted in their own beauty and turned to idolatry. Look at Solomon. His kingdom spanned the world. He had a navy that even came over here to the Western Hemisphere. How do you know they came over here to the Western Hemisphere? Because in New Mexico, there's a Los Lunas stone in Los Lunas, New Mexico, that has the 10 Commandments in Paleo-Hebrew. They said is about 3,000 some years old, which predates our Messiah, about the time of King Solomon. Because he had a navy that went all over the world. You had your hand up? Yeah.
But the credit goes to the Greeks. We talk about Plato and all of them and stuff. But they take the credit, but they got all the knowledge from.
Yeah. And what we have as far as the Holy Bible, the Septuagint and everything, what we have is not all the writings. We don't have all of it. We have enough. We got enough to last a lifetime. I think the book of Isaiah lasts you a lifetime. I mean, just to understand the whole thing from Isaiah 1 to Isaiah 66, because it covers all the time. Even Isaiah 65 and 66 is talking about the new heaven and new earth. I mean, so just Isaiah will last you a whole lifetime. But I mean, so we do have enough, but that's not everything. We don't have it all. We don't have it all. There was more writings, and they seen some of those writings. Do y'all know they still got some of those Hebrew writings in the Vatican over there? They still have some of them written in Hebrew. The Gospel of Matthew was written in Hebrew. It wasn't Greek, written in Hebrew. So they tell you everything's written in Greek. No, it's not. They took that writing. It's almost like they stole it. And we have a commandment that says, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not steal. So look at the ESV. He says, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of Elohim. So you have the sons of Elohim in ESV, and in the Septuagint, you have the angels of Elohim. Now, why is that different than the King James? Let's just scroll down here because we got the King James. Why do we want to look at that? Because the King James says what? When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of what? Yasharal. But at the time that he reset this in the table of nations, Genesis chapter 10, was Yasharal around? They weren't around. They weren't around. So when he separated all these other nations, he separated them according to the angels of Elohim, the sons of Elohim, because there's other gods, and nations had their gods. Basically, that's what he's saying. These nations, I separated these nations. Do you know, and this is why I said at the top that this book was written to the Hebrews, the Canaanites had their gods. He didn't tell them don't worship those gods. The Egyptians had all kinds of gods. And last Shabbat, we brought out Molech. You know, he didn't tell the Canaanites, put away Moloch. He didn't tell them that. He told his people, don't you do what they do. That's their God. I'm your Elohim. I'm your Elohim. Let's go back and look at verse number 9. Deuteronomy 38:9. For Yahuwah's portion is what? His people. Yaakov is the lot of his inheritance. He chose Yaakov. That's why he says, I'm your Elohim. They have their Elohim. Let them have their gods. I've divided the whole lands according to all these different deities, but Yasharal is mine. I've chosen Yasharal. That's why he says, I've chosen you guys. I chose you from the foundation of the world. That's when I chose you. Don't get Romanitis and think that he chose Rome and all that. He did not. He chose Yasharal. So let's go back to Ephesians chapter 1, and I think we're on verse 4, because and some of this we'll go over more, right? Because I'm going kind of fast, right? Everybody keeping up? Okay. He have chosen us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be what? Holy, Kodesh, or set apart. That we should be set apart and without blame before him in love. We're going to get to this next verse, but that we should be holy from the very foundation when he chose Yasharal. Let's look at Deuteronomy 7. Deuteronomy 7 and verse number 6. For thou art what? A holy people unto Yahuwah the Elohim. Yahuwah the Elohim have done what? Chosen thee to be a special people unto himself. What? Above all people that are upon the face of the earth. And he goes on to say, he did not set his love upon you, nor choose you, because ye were more in number than any people, for ye were the fewest of all people. Because when they went into Egypt, they went in as a family, but they came out a nation. But when he chose Abraham didn't even have the promised son yet. And then you look at Isaac. Isaac only had 2 kids. And then you see Jacob, then all of a sudden, you know, he had 12. But, you know, when we was in multi-level marketing, it says you drill down, because once you get, has anybody been in multi-level marketing? Because you might have one here, and then that one might produce one, then that one, and then you finally get one that'll just explode, and boom, there it goes. They get that from Abraham. He had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob, but then Jacob, he had all these kids. So it goes up like this, like a pyramid. They don't have nothing new. Ain't nothing new under the sun. Nothing new under the sun. Yeah. But see, we don't know how many kids Eve had. I guarantee you she had more kids than Jacob's 4 wives. Because, I mean, she had sons and daughters, and out of all the sons and daughters, we only know the name of how many? 3. Abel, Cain, and we don't even know the names of his daughters. And he had a lot of daughters now. And they had sons and daughters, but we only know the name of 3. Okay, so he's chosen them. They are a holy people, a set apart people, right? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 4 and let's look at verse number 3. Look at verse number 6. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of what? That's why they were set apart. That's why they were Kodesh. That's why they were holy. When he brought them out of Egypt, the whole nation was holy. He says, you're a holy people unto me. Did any of them have the Holy Ghost? Oh, some of them were some rascals. Oh, so, I mean, he even said this, he told Musha, he says, I've seen this people. He said, I've seen this people. What did he call them? This is a stiff-necked people. He said, I've seen this people. The Most High Yah looked through time and said, I've seen this people. They are stiff-necked people. Hard-headed folks, roughnecks. I mean, you just implacable. You can never please them. This people wasn't even pleased with the Most High Yah. For 40 years, they had fire by night over the camp and a cloud by day. For 40 years, that couldn't please them. He took them out by miracles. That didn't please them. He gave them, they even call it, what's that? It's manna, but that's what they called it. What's that? He gave them, what's that? That wasn't enough. That wasn't enough. He gave them quails. That was enough. Water out of the rock, not no trickling little, because sometimes you see on the movies, you see a little trick. No, it gushed out a river because they had over 1 million people that's out there in the wilderness, plus livestock. That wasn't good enough. When they withstood Moses, when they withstood Musha, and he told them, y'all get away from them. Who was that? Dathan and Abiram, I think it was. He said, get away from them. And the ground opened up and swallowed about 250 people and then closed back up again. Did that stop him from murmuring and complaining? No, that couldn't please him. He said, I seen this people, man. This is a stiff-necked, hard-headed. You can't please these people. You just can't please them. And then they got mad at Moses. Musha, look what you did, Musha. You killed them people. Like he opened up the ground and swallowed. So they was murmuring, complaining, and so a plague went through and started killing folks. He got tired of them. That's in Numbers 21, because that's a part of our lesson. This is your wisdom, sight, and understanding of nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this is a great nation, a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who hath Elohim so nigh unto them, as Yahuwah our Elohim is in all things that we what? Wow. Wow. You mean you can call on the Most High Yah as your Elohim and things happen? We don't believe. That's the problem. Y'all, because we stiff-necked. I ain't gonna say y'all, me too. We some stiff-necked people. Verse number 8, and what nation is there so great that have statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day? Wow. Wow. So back to Ephesians 1 and verse number 5. I think that's where we're at. Any questions? Anybody got any questions out there? Any questions? Okay. So having predestinated us unto the adoption of what? So who got the adoption? Yasharal did. So when they say, well, Israel was servants, but the church are sons. Oh, no, the adoption was given to Yasharal to be what? Children, sons and daughters. That's the adoption. Because what they like to tell you was, well, it just says that Israel is their servant. Because I read that in the commentary. Israel is their servant, but when you're in the church, you become a son. And a son is greater than the servant. That's when you've been Romanized, because they'll get you to see that. So when you look at, we'll come back here, but so when you look at Hosea 11:1, he says what? When Yasharal was what? Then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. So Israel was his son. So don't believe that when they say, well, they were servants and today we're sons. They don't know. They've been Romanized. And so they're trying to get you to see that the Roman church and Christianity has taken over all of the promises and everything of Israel. That's not true. That's not true. Thou shalt not steal. You know what they call that, right? What do they call that? When the Roman Catholic construct of Christianity stepped in and say all the promises and everything, all that belongs to us, he was talking about the church. What is that called? Y'all know what that's called, right? Replacement theology. It's called replacement theology. So whenever you hear replacement theology, that comes from Rome. You've been Romanized. I got a new word, Romanized. Let's go back to Ephesians, because I'm almost done. But a lot of this, some of this, especially in Ephesians, because we got to get to verse number 10, because in verse number 10, he deals with that gathering together, like he says in Yahuchanan 11th chapter. Remember we read that in Yahuchanan the 11th chapter, which says we're going to be gathered unto him. He says that in let's just scroll up to verse number 10, and just to show you, but we're going to come back. That in the dispensation of the fullness of times. Now, there's some things that's got to happen. The fullness of times, right? When is the fullness of time? It talks about that in where else do we see that? Galatians 4, we've seen the fullness of time when he came the first time. And that's going to be part of it, because we got to get into that adoption. But he says in Romans chapter 11, right? When the fullness of what? The fullness of the Gentiles what? Come in. There's a fullness of Gentiles come in. Yahusha says in Luke 21 and 24 that they're going to be scattered to the four corners, and Jerusalem will be trodden under of the foot of the Gentiles until what? Until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. So we got fullness of time. So that comes into place here, that in the dispensation of the fullness of times, he might gather together. And this is what we're looking at that's going to happen real soon. Because of fullness of times, we're about it there. Fullness of times, we got the Pesach coming up, 3.5 years from 6/9/2019. You got 3.5 years is Pesach 2023. You got 42 months where it's going to get so bad that if he doesn't shorten that time, he shortens it for the elect's sake. And then if he doesn't shorten it, it also says that no flesh is going to be saved. So the only way there will be no flesh on earth is if they have a nuclear holocaust. And isn't it interesting that there's so much talk around nuclear weapons? Tactical nuclear weapons. What was just dismantled between the United States and Russia? It was just dismantled, just in a matter of days, a few days ago. The arms deal, which is called the START Treaty, START Treaty. Russia said they weren't going to renew it. So they're going to restock their nuclear stockpile without any guidance or what's that? They don't have to do it transparently. So the United States won't have to, unless they get intelligence that gets over there, they won't know what they're doing because there's no treaty anymore. So there's a lot of talk about nuclear warfare. But Yahusha told us there's going to be wars and what else? Rumors of wars. So that's all you hear now. You open up the news, man, we got wars, we got war. Then there's rumors of wars coming. There's tactical nuclear warfare. There's the nuclear holocaust. If he doesn't shorten those days, won't be no flesh. Once they start launching nuclear weapons, don't you know if they launch a nuclear weapon even into Kyiv, is that what it's called? Kyiv, Ukraine, their capital. Is it Kyiv? If they shoot a tactical nuclear weapon that would just take out that city, because they have, you got tactical nuclear weapons. They have supersonic missiles. Not only Russia, but North Korea has it as well, that can hit cities in the United States. Supersonic missiles, which means they flying faster than the speed of sound. So, we would try to intercept it, but can you imagine trying to intercept something that's going faster than the speed of sound? Or would you just try to retaliate as soon as you know one's up in the air? Because I think if one of those supersonic missiles heads over here to like New York or whatever, if they can't intercept it, because you got to try to intercept it or knock it out, even if they were successful to crash it and knock it out, what's going to happen? You'll have all that nuclear fallout. It's just going to be in the air, then it's going to come down to the ground. Once a nuclear weapon is launched, that's it. I mean, if they can't stop it, they're launching one. We got our eyes set on Moscow. We got our eyes set on China. Beijing. I mean, we've got nuclear missiles and they've got nuclear missiles. So if I can't intercept yours, I'm going to hit you with one of mine. And so you're going to have them shoot nuclear weapons here and there. Wars and rumors of wars. He says, if I don't shorten them days, because I wonder if people believe the Bible. I wonder if they, do y'all really believe the Bible? Okay, this is just, we haven't got there yet because, the fullness of times, and then he's going to gather together in one. This is going to be the gathering he's talking about. There's not 2, 3, 4, 6 gatherings. He says, gather together in one, all things. So what are the all things? When he talks about gathering together in one, all things, he's going all the way back to Torah. All of those things, everything that's written about this gathering that's in Torah, which means you got to go back to Deuteronomy, you got to go back to Isaiah, you got to go back to Zechariah, you got to go back to Ezekiel, you got to go back to Jeremiah, you got to go back to all of those where it says he's gathering Yasharah. Go back to Yahusha when he says it. He says he's going to gather. Gather together in one all things, and he's going to do it in who? In Yahusha, the Mashiach. Both which are where? Heaven, and which are? Okay, Matthew 24 and verse 30. Notice what he says, gather together all things in Christ, both which are in heaven and in earth. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, shofar blowing, a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. That's what Paul's talking about. Same thing here. Same thing here. Gathering together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So let's go to Deuteronomy 30, because remember, he says the fullness of times he's going to gather in one all things. So we have to go all the way back. Deuteronomy 30, verse number 4. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will Yahuwah thy Elohim do what? Gather thee. From thence will he fetch thee. This is the same thing. They're all talking about the same thing. So when you talk about Paul and what Paul says as far as Thessalonians, where it says we're going to be caught up to meet, it's all, he's talking about the same event when he gathers his people from one end of heaven to the other, from one end of the earth to the other. But that will, I wanted to go through Ephesians there, and we'll revisit a lot of that because we got to deal with the adoption and who the adoption. Remember, the predestination of his people. Let's go back to Ephesians, because these are some things we're going to pull out that we're going to talk about as we lead up as we lead up to a Pesach. Ephesians 1, and we're looking at verse 5, and we'll just finish this up real quick. We won't bring out everything. Having predestinated us to the adoption of children by Yahushua Mashiach to himself according to the good pleasure of his will, to the praise and the glory of his grace, wherein he hath made us accepted in the beloved, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins. We got to look at that. We got to look at, remember it says the redemption, those who are redeemed through his blood. Remember we read that in Revelations 5 and 9. Remember that we read that? So, the forgiveness of sins according to the riches of his grace, wherein he hath abounded toward us in all wisdom and prudence, having made known unto us the mystery of his will according to his good pleasure, which he hath purposed in himself, that in the dispensation of the fullness of times he might gather together in one all things in Mashiach, both which are in heaven and which are on earth in him, in whom also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestinated. So this inheritance, when we look at that inheritance, when did we first see that inheritance? Didn't we see that already? Because we've seen that in Deuteronomy when he divided up the nations. He said Jacob was going to be his what? His inheritance. So we might obtain an inheritance being predestinated. So we'll have to look at that predestinated. We'll have to look at that predestinated. So just real quick on verse number 11, click on verse number 11 here, and we'll just and then go to compare, and let's see what that predestinated. Where's the? Can you go down to King James? Yeah, down here. Predestinated. G4309. Can we click on that? What is this? To limit in what? What does predestined means? Oh, so he already has his chosen in advance. Notice now, to limit in advance. So when we look at that word predestinated, he's already determined in advance. Determining, what are you saying? He shows us all of this in Torah. He shows us who he has chosen. He shows us the inheritance, his inheritance. He showed us all of that. He predetermined it. To limit in advance, okay? Determined before. When was all of this determined before? Well, you have to go to Torah to see it. You got to go to Torah to see it. So we'll look at that predestination at a later date. But any questions or comments out there? It's 9 o'clock. Good. We're done. That's an hour and a half, right? I was going fast. This is lightning, man. Slow down. But you have to look at that one man and dying for the nation. All of this plays in, and salvation is of that nation. He's already planned this out well in advance. All of this is planned out well in advance. And so don't let nobody deceive you into thinking that they stole something. Thou shalt not steal. You can't. No, all of this was predetermined. It was pre-selected. That's why he says you got to get it. If you want to be saved, if you want soteria, if you want to be delivered, if you want to be rescued, you have to be in the Yahudim or in Israel, just like they had to get in the ark if they wanted to be saved. So just keep that in mind, because we have Pesach coming up. It is a feast that we are to memorialize, which means you're never supposed to forget. And anybody that believes in Good Friday and Easter Sunday, that's a lie. It's just an outright lie. And if they follow that, if they follow the Good Friday, Easter Sunday, it's just an outright lie. It's paganism. And he doesn't even want us to make mention of other gods. He said, I don't even want it to come out your mouth. So these are our holy days and our feast days. The next new moon you see is a new year. So we'll be saying Happy New Year. We're going to be saying Happy New Year. This is our new year. Now we got to prepare, because in 14 days is the Passover. And it's something that we're supposed to memorialize throughout every generation forever. Even Shaul kept it. Even in the book of Acts, they kept the feast days. Even in the book of Acts, and in 1 Corinthians 5 and 7, he says that Mashiach is our Passover, and then verse number 8 says, therefore keep the feast. So they still kept the feast, because Shaul said that as touching the righteousness in the law, he was what? Blameless. He was blameless. As far as the righteousness of the law, I'm blameless, which means he was obedient, because to obey is your righteousness. So he was obedient. So he didn't break. He kept those feasts. I got to get back to Jerusalem. It's the feast time. I got to get to Jerusalem. It's the feast. I ain't going to miss that. I know I'm out on my missionary journeys. He was way out in Ephesus, but he said, I got to get back. I got to plan my trip, because I got to be back in Jerusalem for the feast. They kept the feast. They kept the feast. It's those who are blinded by the Roman religion that says you don't have to keep the feast, and the feast days are over, and the Sabbath day is over. They're blinded. They've been Romanized with Roman lens. And so we just have to get back to the truth and walk in the truth. So when you can go to Torah and go to this book and do what they're doing, that's your righteousness. That's your righteousness. And you can be blameless, because in fact we got a little help, don't we? Because Shaul says, I can do all things through Mashiach. I can do all things through Christ, through the Mashiach, which strengthens me. I have no excuse. Okay, if there's no questions or comments, we thank you for joining us. Those who are online on the different platforms that we're on, we say shalom to you. Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of Yahuwah. Because when we all get together and everybody says Baruch haba Hashem Yahuwah, then he is gonna return. So he has to get you in an uncomfortable position. You have to be so afraid or so ready that you're going to say, blessed is he that cometh in the name. I mean, but you have to get to that place, because a lot of people are just still too comfortable here. They're just too comfortable. And so he's going to shake things up. He's going to really shake things up. Might not be so much on the dinner table. And we're making preparations. We got a prep room here. We're making preparations. And if there is, if he hasn't gathered us and one of those bombs go off in the air and it contaminates everything, we're actually making our preparations. We're preparing. We've got a prep room downstairs that we'll be able to have some food and stuff that's not contaminated. But I'm hoping he gathers us before something like that happens. But something like that could happen, and we just have to we're still waiting. We're still waiting for him to come and get us. So with that, we're going to say shalom. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll be back on the Shabbat for our Shabbat service. Keep the prayers going up for our brothers and our sisters, Akis or Kotis.